If you yell from the hills long enough, you might actually start getting people to believe it. Whether it's proclaiming to be the next Hokage or the Digimon King, we find the approach of telling yourself that you're nice like that in the mirror and to every passing person is a great way to manifest it. Famously though, card games are not built equal. Being a major protagonist or antagonist doesn't set you up for success, so we want to know whether Shoutmon was just more than a capable squire or was able to become the king in the competitive scene. So we ask, how good was Shoutmon actually? And if this format seems familiar to you, that's because we took heavy inspiration from the folks over at False Square Gaming for their fantastic coverage of the Pokemon VGC scene for both singles and doubles, and we wanted to do the same thing here for the Digimon TCG. With this video and all future videos, we want to say a big thank you to the stats behind being able to make this video possible. So big thank you to Digital Gate Open, DigimonMeta.com, big thank you to East, Eggman, and any other resources that we use to get our data. And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. Shoutmon blitzed into the Digimon TCG in the game's 5th mainline set, Battle of Omni. The mono red cards would add additional support to the already popular red Omnimon list that had taken the competitive scene by storm since the game's Eastern and Western formats. Players were previously having to play a game of chicken in the raising area as they built up their stack towards the mega level to then start making moves on security. In many situations, a Digimon on board would have to choose between digivolving and attacking, but Shoutmon asks, why not have your cake and eat it too? That's where the keyword Blitz comes in. Introducing alongside Shoutmon with the Battle of Omni, Blitz is a when digivolving ability that lets the evolving Digimon attack when your opponent has one or more memory. No longer would you have to give up security pressure in order to reach the next level of your line, and instead you can now check face at your peak form. Shoutmon himself on-play searches the top 5 for a Digimon with Shoutmon in its name and a Digimon with Blitz. This potentially allows your 3 memory search to find you other copies of itself to dig deeper, further parts of the line, and your finisher at the top end. The Shoutmon DX Turbo line proved to be a strong core amongst the red good stuff style of deck building in early Digimon. Early Eastern builds would make use of your BT5 searching Agumon and Shoutmon to find your pieces, with most decks opting for a playset of the ST1 Greymon for its boosted security attack, coupling this with either BT4 Voltramon or the new BT5 Omni Shoutmon. Your inherits for blitzing stack would line up for 3 checks minimum, providing a Gaia Force didn't have other plans in store for you. With cheap blockers being so common, Shoutmon lists often employed the searchable Metal Greymon from ST1 to gain value out of these multi-check swings getting blocked. As all things do, Shoutmon as part of the red good stuff core of BT5 still would ultimately boil down to red Omni Turbo, with different pilots opting for different ratios on your Omnimons. The BT5 Omnimon, better known as Blitz Omni, would be how most Shoutmon games would be ending thanks to Shoutmon DX being able to load Z Greymon as a source to pop 5k blockers, and Omnimon being an unsuspend with inbuilt protection against rogue security options. The deck would see little innovation through BT5 in the East, with the major changes coming in some pilots opting for low-end blockers capping at 6k to help in the mirror. A delicate plan also made sporadic appearances in the deck to allow multiple check blitz attacks to go off without worrying about Gaia Force. Since you'd be attacking while passing turn, the blitz decks uniquely had the memory to squeeze into ADP before committing to their line. In the West, where BT5 launched as the 3rd major set, players took most of the same core, however there were notable changes to deck building in the regions where best of 3 is more common. Here, a deviation from the BT1 Taikamiya and BT5 Tai and Mat would see spaces for Nokia Shiramine and Takumi Alba, also from the BT5 as admissions. These would serve as early investments or memory optimizations for building the lines, Nokia for reducing costs, and Takumi for digging deeper with each evolution. The competitive circuit was relatively sparse in the game's early days thanks to the worldwide pandemic, but in what we were looking for, we are able to say a congratulations to Todd from Oceania for taking 1st place in the TAC Evo Cup with the Shoutmon DX core that notably didn't finish with Blitz Omni, instead leaning heavy on 3 copies of Takumi Alba in an attempt to stifle Rookie Rush, which was becoming popular in the West, and 2 copies of Digimon Fusion, which would allow for a clean kill in the next turn from 0 cost. It doesn't matter if your Omnimon bounces at the end of turn if your opponent doesn't get one at all. All in all, you could say the debut generation for the wannabe king was a successful one. BT6 was light in terms of new support, only giving a new Shoutmon that while it wasn't a searcher, had an inheritable to draw 1 when attacking if your attacking Digimon had Blitz. With new toy syndrome and a general power increase in BT6, results did drop for Shoutmon. The West only had 1 Shoutmon placement, making use of the same Shoutmon core playset and opting for 3 of the Tai and Mat security +1 tamer. Congratulations to Anders Williams on their win at the Australian Tamer Battle. In the East, it would pick up a few smaller events, with the main changes being incorporating some things seen in the West in BT5, Takumi, Mega Digimon Fusion, and a heavier lean on Blitz Omni would be the most notable changes. BT4 Heir of Dragons was a cute draw option that allowed the Greymon side of the line to represent 2 draws, while also clearing small bodies. However, a huge change that would bolster the consistency towards the tail end of BT6 would be the memory boosts. For 3 memory, the ability to check the top 4 cards for any red Digimon did run the risk of bottom decking your Omnimons, but for the non-Greymon or Blitz cards, that meant finding your other techs as long as they were red. Crucially, as much as Blitz was a fantastic way to pass turns, sometimes you actually wanted to be able to safely perform actions without going over 0. That's where the second half of the red memory boost comes in. After using it, or if it pops out of security, it then goes to the battle area like a Tamer would. For the next turn, by sending it to the trash, you can gain 2 memory, allowing for further extensions that other 3-cost investments like Agumon or Shoutmon simply cannot refund. Sure, it may not be able to check security, but when most of your lethal turn comes in one go, the 1 damage is rarely going to be the breaking point. However, despite some interesting card options, it would largely fall out of favor as the red good stuff deck because there were new, sharper red OTK lines going around, and that line was Jesmon. Being able to attack over unsuspended Digimon, unsuspend natively, and deal all but the final checks through piercing damage, Jesmon outclassed the Blitz engine by sheer memory efficiency. Who even needs Blitz if you can kill them without passing turn? Shoutmon DX would still appear in early Jesmon lists, but only to play second fiddle as the next best red beat stick. BT7 would not be kind to the king. With no new support in the metagame that was becoming more and more aggressive and memory efficient, memory extension without passing turn became more of a focal point, rendering Blitz exclusively for finishing games rather than pushing damage. Shoutmon would more or less go into hiding for BT7 all the way through BT9, where it only received 2 additional pieces of support in Flare Rock Soul, an option that would delete a 5k or less and then allow one of your Digimon to evolve into a Shoutmon in name, which in theory would be a cool extender for your higher end Digimon all having access to Blitz. However, Omni Shoutmon X would not be built as well as some of the other X antibody Digimon. When staving off the X program, this Omni Shoutmon would evolve for 0 and only be able to attack unsuspended Digimon if it had Omni Shoutmon or X antibody in its sources. Before the advent of Overflow, there's no world where you'd be spending 3 memory to pop a blocker and be blitzing over the body for all this work. So unfortunately, BT7 would mark the start of a consecutively quiet commiserations for our conquesting king. But that's not to say the king was fully down and out. Fans of the series will know that while Digimon is about digivolving, Shoutmon is rarely known for actually taking on a higher form through the series staple of evolution. BT10 introduced the advent of Digicross, a mechanic that would catapult Shoutmon back into the limelight. Shoutmon would be finally joined by the gang, with BT10 adding most eventual members of the Crossheart crew. Instead of focusing on Shoutmon's eventual digivolutions, the game plan revolved around making your mechs, or rather, mech. Shoutmon X4 was the be-all and end-all for Shoutmon on Crossheart and BT10, thanks to the Digicross mechanic allowing players to reduce its hefty 9 play costs by 2 for each of Shoutmon, Ballistamon, Darulumon, and Starmons down to just 1 cost. This champion level Digimon would immediately net you a draw 2. Sure, you're going -5 from hand just to get a draw 2 back, but that's under the assumption your sources were coming from your hand. Leader of the bunch, Taiki Kudo, the 3-cost red Tamer could suspend itself to place Digicross materials underneath any of your Tamers. How do they get you, you ask? Well, Digicross wouldn't be Digicross in most cases without mentioning the save and material save mechanics. These on-deletion timing abilities place the Digimon or its sources, in the case of material save, under a Tamer for future use. Now that -3 in hand could easily be a 1-cost +1. This would often mean having multiple Taikis to facilitate multiple Shoutmon Cross 4s in concept. However, in practice, Cross 4's second end of attack ability would place all 4 of its materials under a Tamer, then restand a Tamer when you delete this Digimon. Its material save 2 was realistically just a formality on a high roll, as more often than not, Cross 4 will be surviving its security check and going out on its own terms. And at this point, we'd be remiss to not actually talk about the Lego bricks that make up this Build-A-Bear combo. Starmons when attacking inherit as a draw 1, meaning your Cross 4 would routinely be drawing 3 cards for 1 cost. Darulumon reduced your opponent's security by 2k, effectively allowing Shoutmon to swing for 10k base, and Ballistamon granted piercing to allow you to fight for board and keep the tempo, and the final piece of the puzzle, of course, Shoutmon himself gave rush to all Digimon with Shoutmon in name. The former pieces were all nice to haves, but mostly were there to bring the cost down. Recycling Rush to let your on-play Digimon swing on the turn they came down is what helped this deck go from a cheap draw engine to a one-drop, one-stop shop on getting your match slip signed. Sorry, did we say one cost? We meant 0 cost. Joining Taiki and Shoutmon, fellow cross-heart tamers Akari Hinamoto and Zenjiro Tsurugi were added in BT10. Akari gives a draw 1 when cross-heart Digimon is played, and Zenjiro refunding 1 memory. Meaning with Zenjiro in play, your perfect cross-4 stack is coming down for absolutely no cost the first time, multiple times if you restand the Zenjiro with a cross-4 end of attack. Despite what some people might tell you, cross-4 and the new rookie were not the only additions to BT10. Sparrowmon joins the team for cross 5, using the usual suspects and our bird friend to play Shoutmon cross 5 for 0, no Zenjiro needed. Material Save 3, Blocker and Native Sec +1 allows this absolute monster to speed up the number of reps needed to send your opponent to game 2. Sure, your resources would stay in the mech this time, as Cross 5, unlike Cross 4, refused to go boom. But Sparrowmon's reboot inherit means you're not having to pick between offense and defense. Shoutmon 4 Model Drip also makes an appearance, coming in at the champion level. Shoutmon King version, unlike the rest of the new Cross-Heart core, was rarely more than a 2 of. It has the unique ability to be named Shoutmon, as well as recur any Digicross card from trash. With the Material Save 1, it can also put another piece under a tamer thanks to a Digicross requirement. Unlike the rookie, it doesn't give Rush, instead giving an actual 2k inherit. More often than not, this would be your 3-cost pick up Cross 4 button if you didn't draw another one off your rookie crashing into security to draw 1 off the egg, and your general draw 3, or more if you had Akari. If it wasn't enough to get a new Digi-Egg, Rookies, Champion, and Ultimate, which funny enough is also the name of our membership tiers, which you should totally check to get videos like this and vote on Digimon you want to see in future videos. As well as 3 new tamers, Shoutmon was gifted the archetypal options as well. Hero of the Skies was tagged Cross-Heart so it was easier to search out in a pinch, and saw use in early lists for giving the option to have a 2-cost Sec +1 increase or draw 2. And with Cross 5 in play, this theme song option would allow you to take both options. 3-check 0-cost rush bodies? Yes please. Now, with play cost reduction being the name of the game, floodgates that prevent players from reducing play costs immediately saw a return to force. The king and his court had an answer for that too. Darudamon had a relatively cheap 4 play cost with an on-play that would shrink a Digimon by 3k if you had a Cross-Heart Digimon or Tamer, making it a great spot removal to then enable the rest of the deck. Made better by the fact that Akari and Zenjiro played their respective Digimon for free when played for their 3 cost, and then you gain the value. The king took over the Eastern meta so fast you'd be forgiven for thinking it was a coup from the inside, dethroning the previous monarchs with such speed and ferocity that its reign of terror would send ripples through Bandai's decision making to the point that a long-awaited ban would limit Shoutmon Cross 4 and its signature Sunrise Buster to 1 copy each on December 2022 for the Eastern format after a grueling 7 months since its printing. Why Sunrise Buster, you ask? We mentioned Cross 5's theme song option, but didn't really touch on the signature move of Cross 4, and that's because this absolute house of a card probably could have gotten its own video if it were left untouched in the current state of Digimon, with a host of abusable targets. It costs 5 to play, requiring both red and yellow sources, but after those have achieved it, you might have the greatest power budget on a 5-cost card ever printed. Playing any one red or yellow tamer without paying the cost whilst preserving the on-play might not seem like much on the surface, but then shoot down one target with minus 3000 DP for every red or yellow tamer in play meant that once players figured out the best way to play your future Taiki and Akari was with an additional scaling shrink, the tempo of the deck got even more ridiculous. Now you couldn't even fight for board versus Shoutmon because anything that stuck around would be getting hit with the shrink ray, while spitting out more and more tamers than you could shake a stick at. And if it popped out of security, activating its main for 0 cost, the advantage of the game would swing like a jet-propelled pendulum. By not mentioning anything to do with tags, deck builders were opting to play sometimes as high as 16 tamers, 4 of each of your Cross-Heart tamers and Taikamiya, who was a 4-cost red memory setter, being played for 1 more, then dealing DP- was a tasty proposition. It also helped that your 1 and 0 cost rush body beat sticks would naturally have the required number of sources to enable that +1 security check that Tai would give them. Nearing security control levels of scaling board presence and security threat, Sunrise Buster is a one-of-a-kind custom card that absolutely could not stay at 4. They were using it to then play memory setters to pay 5 or pay a 3-cost Akari to play the 4-cost Darulumon, then deal additional damage. Even with the format defining BT9 Death Xmon, decks completely collapsed under the weight of the insane amount of DP- that the option provided, and with the excess card draw looping Cross 4 provided it a near certainty that Cross-Heart player would eventually have more options than their opponent could present counters. It was so dominant at cheating the memory gauge and getting value that Cross 4's other signature, Burning Star Crusher, is probably a card many of you didn't even know existed, because all it would do is delete one of your opponent's Digimon with less DP or equal to a level 4 Digimon of your choice. Why would you ever spend 4 to get an 8k or 10k pop at best when you could just spend 1 more to get a free tamer and potentially shrink by enough DP to vaporize anything from a rookie to even the biggest and baddest of megas? As a result of its rap sheet pre-ban, we've limited its placements only to first place in Evo Cup or higher placements for the East. So congratulations to Hara from Japan winning the Tokorozawa Evo Cup, Sieg from Japan winning the Card Shop Evo Cup, JH from Singapore winning the BT10 SG Evo Cup, Vincentius from Indonesia winning the TCG Nohea Evo Cup, Marcus T from Singapore winning the GameAcad Evo Cup, William Te from Malaysia winning the Ava CYN Games Evo Cup, Norman from Singapore winning the Toys Terminal Evo Cup, and N from Japan winning the Bandai Japan Evo Cup. After seeing the uncontested damage the Tyrant was doing to the scene, the oppressive rule that Shoutmon was having on the Eastern format could absolutely not be allowed to sustain an equally vocal Western metagame. BT10 was expected to push massive numbers thanks to how affordable and how competitive the box art cards were expected to be. Product flew off the shelves, but much to the dismay of those looking to make a splash in the competitive scene, Bandai were quick to try Shoutmon for its crimes and put the ban hammer just 2 weeks after the Western release of Xros Encounter in North America. With no major tournaments early in BT10, they had the ability to do so without affecting the competitive scene too much. However, many were unhappy that the product they just bought had tanked in value seemingly overnight. With the Cross 4 Turbo effectively dead thanks to the November 2022 ban list, the deck would now be able to actually put real emphasis on the rest of the line at the cost of the speed it once enjoyed. As a result, during BT10, the assassination of the oncoming Monarch would result in radio silence for results. Congrats to Drazius, who won the October Raid and Trade DC1 Grand Prix, being the only pre-ban list in the West to win on Crossheart. We also saw results for 7th place at the November 12th Core TCG Ultimate Cup for the only top post-ban, and Jose Francisco Torabella 1st place at the 2022 LATAM Nationals to qualify for Worlds 2022. As much as we spoke about all the things Shoutmon as a deck could do, there were duds in Crossheart as a whole, some of them even with the Shoutmon name. Cross 4B was sometimes seen as a tech card at lower levels, however in all honesty the card is only just being spoken about now for a reason. Digicrossing for a pretty colossal 9, -2 for Shoutmon Cross 4 and Beelzemon, down to 5 in ideal conditions. This is one of the most expensive Shoutmon crosses you can actually play. It evolving for 3 is the intended line, with an on-play effect also being a when digivolving. It could be used to recur cards from trash, but required the otherwise brick Beelzemon just to be able to use this. Cross 5B wasn't much better, but at least this maintains the blocker that Cross 5 had, in addition to these B forms also having Armour Purge. This time you'd be able to use Beelzemon to pop a level 4 Digimon if it was in sources, but at 4 cost Evo, it just isn't worth it for this kind of payoff, let alone playing it for 7 under ideal Digicross conditions. Despite the lack of representation in the West, it's without a doubt that BT10 was a successful format for Shoutmon and his kingly crew, utterly devastating the game to the point that it caused many to quit at the height of its reign. Shoutmon may have been fully revitalized in BT10, but it was actually only half of the support that the set was intending to receive. Main set 11 Dimension Phase introduced new Shoutmon at the low and high end, adding to the already impressive toolkit of our loud and proud protagonist. Hitting the Eastern format in September of 2022, this set would drop before Shoutmon received its ban list hit, further cementing its place at the top. Talking first about the new additions to the Shoutmon line, Shoutmon and Starmons can now jump into the battle. Evolving for 1 over a yellow Digi-Egg or 0 over a red rookie, this material save 1 rookie more often than not will be Digicrossing for 5 -1 for each Shoutmon and Starmons to apply -3k to a target for the turn, then with 2 sources popping a 2k or less. Effectively, this allows Shoutmon to clear 2 floodgates in one go depending on the opponent, or challenge and deal with 5k Digimon by shrinking them in range. With Rush Shoutmon as well, players could keep up the aggro by letting an extra chip in and then saving the Shoutmon under a tamer for later use. Joining Cross 4 in 1 cost Rust bodies, the Starmonless Shoutmon Cross 3 added additional card search revealing top 3 and adding 2 cards with the Crossheart or Bluefair trait to hand. Then if it stuck around to the next turn, it could take a fork to the electrical outlet and give the user 1 memory while material saving 2. In addition to these lower end supports, both the Omni Shoutmon name and the Shoutmon Megazords would get new additions. Omni Shoutmon being able to warp Digivolve over Shoutmon for 4 cost. When treated for Digicross, you could also treat its name as Shoutmon for good measure, but if you were Digivolving, Omni Shoutmon would be a wide floodgate hater. It gave not so cheap access to a 4k pop, then with Shoutmon and sources, it could delete 2 4k bodies instead. Unlike other boss monsters, Omni Shoutmon itself would have regular save rather than material save, which is important as it also had an inherited effect, giving Sec +1 to any Shoutmon in name. Shoutmon Double Cross would also be getting a retrain from the BT5 days as a 13 cost -3 for Omni Shoutmon and Z Greymon, material save 2 Digimon with 12,000 DP. It on play mix and match the red pop with an 8k bullet and blue flare's freeze abilities on a single card, allowing you to pop one, freeze one in situations where you didn't otherwise have the resources to answer multiple bodies. Even under ideal Digicross conditions of 7 cost, you'd be passing turn with Shoutmon Double Cross, so the lack of access to rush wouldn't really matter all that much. It could then delete itself at the end of attack to give its owner back one of those original memory. The final piece of the Megazord blocks puzzle was Shoutmon Cross 7. This 14 play cost, 13,000 DP behemoth could be played for just 2 cost under ideal conditions. With native rush, the Omni Shoutmon Sec +1 could allow this thing to immediately apply pressure. On play, it would delete one Digimon with equal to or less DP, and during all turns, it'd be plus 1000 DP for every 2 Digivolution cards in its sources. Should something bad happen to it, 4 of these sources will make it back under a tamer thanks to material save 4. The addition of a new white tamer, likely to be anti-synergy with Sunrise Buster, Taiki, Kiriha and Nene teamed up as a 4-drop tamer that at the start of the main phase would allow players to load a Crossheart or Blue Flare to gain 1 memory and draw 1. This crucially allowed for Crossheart to load its proverbial garnets such as Z Greymon and Omni Shoutmon under a tamer for later use without having to commit them to the field at any point. The full power version of Mervemon, would also see infrequent splashes in lists, with the effective 8 play cost spitting out 1 purple level 4 lower Digimon, or 1 Crossheart in its traits from your trash without paying the cost. But when Digicrossing, you could bump that number up to 2. All Retaliators or Crosshearts would then gain Rush and Blocker. So how did all of these additions affect the Eastern metagame? It should come as no surprise that in the East it absolutely shellacked its way through BT11. With the ban list still not in effect for the entirety of Eastern BT11, what little resistance there was left completely crushed underfoot. If you didn't build exactly to beat Crossheart, you were getting mollywopped by it. And even if you did, you were probably still getting rolled unless your means of beating Crossheart was also to play Crossheart, with one exception. With the upwards of 6 tamers on board at any time, Dexmon started to become a mainstay in decks, sometimes sending a chip into security and free playing a tamer, or hitting the still limited Sunrise Buster to play a tamer could be an effective way of reducing your Dexmon by 3. It, in addition to clearing any Cross 7 Digimon on the Crossheart board, would be a way of having consistent control versus Shoutmon. It would need to be answered lest your finest figurine creation get dropped from a high shelf, effectively becoming a Sunrise Buster magnet to protect your other Digimon from harm. Other tech slots to try and slow down your opponent in the mirror included Crimson Blaze, which would wipe out any non-Cross 4 champion or lower and stop the tamers from being straight 2-for-1s for a turn. Lists bounce between Cross 4 Turbo with the new pieces and a focus on Cross 7, running as high as 3 copies of Cross 7, Omni Shout and Zeeg to facilitate the 2-cost rush body as many times as they could to burst their opponents down in fewer reps. In some of these lists, Cutemon would also join the crew, not as a Digivolution cost reduction blocker, but instead with the new BT11 variant. For 3 cost, you could slot a Crossheart from your trash under one of your tamers, and if Darulumon was on board, 2 Crosshearts. This would often patch up the holes left by Cross 7's material save 4 not fully being used for all the materials. But the true diabolical alternate form of the deck was making waves in Malaysian players' focus on Mervemon at the tail end of BT11. While Shoutmon Cross 4 beatdown was of course incredibly consistent thanks to its additions of Shoutmon Cross 3 adding search pieces, some players would forgo the Sunrise Buster entirely for playsets of Gravity Crush and Blinding Ray. Giving your board Rush and Blocker with Mervemon often meant giving the deck Blocker because that hefty 7 cost Digicross would be passing turn. By committing to memory gain resources, the Rush would actually be relevant. By Digicrossing with the BT11 Ignitemon as your cross target, its inherit would trigger on Mervemon Resolution, bringing 11 down to 8 down to 7. By making use of memory extensions through Zenjiro, the Trio Tamer, or Kiriha as a memory setter, fewer of the Gravity Crush or Blinding Rays would be needed to have Mervemon hit the field and keep turn. Importantly, Merva's rush effect was on all turns rather than specifically the Digimon she played out, meaning that any of the Crosshearts that survived their security check could be used for Shoutmon Cross 4 or Cross 3 for no cost, and if they didn't, they save and be used as materials anyway. Thanks to having native rush, some variations were able to make use of Omni Shoutmon's security attack inherent to have the attacking body hit even harder. Although this was more of a gimmick, with enough natural pressure as soon as Mervemon hit the field, an extra security check wasn't really needed. Part of the reason this adaptation started to become more popular is how less reliant it was on having a huge number of tamers on board. While the mirror was the go-to for many games, the rise of Blackwall Greymon X and its tamer hate required players to actually make changes. With the announcement of the Sunrise Buster and Cross 4 bans, and the general disdain towards Shoutmon on the crew, Blackwall Greymon X, who was constantly competing with Shoutmon for the top spots, saw a massive rise in popularity and results. Being a difficult to remove wall with deletion protection made it incredibly difficult for Cross 7 builds to deal with because most of the checks would be on that single body. While there were a few weeks where it dropped down to less than the stellar number of wins, allowing for the likes of All Force Veemon and Machine Dramon to outplace it, the king would return, interestingly back with Cross 7 and Cross 5 as the focus instead of this gimmicky Blinding Crush variant. Between the top 3 decks of the format, it was considered losing into Blackwell Greymon X. However, the third deck, Grandis Guagamon, that was strong into BWG, was comparatively less strong into Shoutmon, establishing a 3-horse race for the top. While it may have stumbled a couple of times compared to the previous format, the king undoubtedly had a fantastic season in the East. Western results for Shoutmon comparatively stayed lacking. With the early hit on BT10, the deck's pilots were cross-hot fans rather than those just looking for the strongest pile of cards. The king had an arguably better time of things in the West than the East comparatively. The April 1st ban list gave the community the greatest April Fool's joke of only restricting BT11 Greymon X antibody, drastically reducing the speed and survivability of BWGX. As a result, Crossheart was able to snatch some decent results despite having a worthy contender at the top spot. For Western results, we want to say a massive congratulations to Christian Rivera Acosta winning Raid and Trade's European Nationals, winning the whole thing over Blackwell Greymon with a Blinding Crush Mervacross. EU Nats had 4 Crosshearts in top 8, with Blinding Ray Gravity Crush Mervamon build being 3 of those 4 tops. Congratulations to Kevin Tai coming second at the Core TCG North American Nationals with Cross 7. Mark Elazar 10th at the Oceania Sydney Regionals. Paulo Arevalo 9th at the LATAM April Webcam Regionals. Victor Vasquez and Edward Test 3rd and 8th respectively at the Nest Mexico Regionals, Grayson Schartzer 5th at Carta Magica's April Webcam Regionals, and Matavet Pankow 5th at Raiden Trade's April Regionals, all on Cross 7 base builds. For Mervacross, Claudio Gutierrez 10th at LATAM TCG's April Webcam Regionals, David De Druin and Stefan Discht 10th and 6th respectively at Raiden Trade's April EU Regionals, and Billy Chung winning Carta Magica's April Webcam Regionals, all on Mervacross. While BT12 was well under its way in the West, the English side of the game was lagging behind, still in BT11. As a result, when both sides collided for the 2022 World Championships, the format was played in BT11. Here, LATAM Nationals winner Francisco would win Worlds piloting Crossheart, opting for a Cross 7 base without Mervamon. His list made space for Lonke Aristacto as a surprise defensive option to handle the Blackwell Greymon matchup by having non-deletion removal for BWGX. Whilst Blackwell Greymon X could become DP immune during some turns thanks to Metal Greymon X antibody, when at 3 or fewer, Lonk instead sends Digimon to security, allowing Francisco to completely eliminate threats if they hit security, or paying a hefty 8 cost to get rid of the pieces. Played late in 2023, the event was using the post-April 1st ban, resulting in Greymon X being limited to 1 copy. The same as Sunrise Buster, which notably was absent from the World's winning list, and Cross 4, which did make an appearance. Congratulations once again to Jose Francisco Torrebella for his World's win and sending off Shoutmon on an absolute high for BT11. BT12 across time would introduce the Cross 4 and Sunrise Buster hits to the Japanese version of the game, allowing the new additions to BT12 to actually take some space front and center. Based on the follow-up to Cross Wars, the Young Hunters Who Leapt Through Time, the undubbed 3rd season, Shoutmon would make his appearance as part of the Hunters deck style. Focusing around using the save mechanic, Hunters would choose to have your level 3 and level 4s as small Digicross targets, then cross up using the new Tamers to reduce your Digivolution costs by loading sources underneath. The new BT12 Shoutmon was quite frankly pack filler. It had save as its main effect, and then its inherit was a when attacking 4k pop if the Digimon had save in text. But we've come a long way from evolving for 4 just to get a 4k pop on your Omni Shoutmons, but even this wasn't enough to see viability in either Hunters or Crossheart. Largely due to the fact that material save is not considered as save, meaning the new card design of save in text wasn't enough to patch viability for it. That same can't be said though for the King. While he was no longer the secret rare of the set, Shoutmon King version was an absolute powerhouse, seen in play sets in most topping lists, Digicrossing for 5 -2 3 cost or Digivolving for 2 over a rookie with save in text. It's on play when Digivolving allowed you to play a Taiki Kudo, Yuamano or Tageru Akashi from your hand without paying the cost, immediately turning save live should you need to proc its on deletion, which not only saved itself but also loaded another save in text Digimon from trash underneath a tamer. Sure, you were going -3 from hand if you were digicrossing this to the field, but then considering you would then get to save it and its digicross material, it was a strict upgrade to material save. Better yet, that 4k pop inherit was also present here, allowing you to keep pressure on floodgates that were looking to thwart your digicrossing attempts. When the King wasn't busy looking after its people, it was digivolving back into Omni Shoutmon once again. The Hunter's formula for inherits was color based, so it should come as no surprise that once again, a when attacking 4k pop was on the table. But when digivolving, Omni Shoutmon would once again look to pop a 4k body, then for every 2 cards in its Digivolution cards, add 3k to the maximum DP on deletion. This could climb to some pretty staggering numbers with full investment, but without save as an ability, this Digimon will be swinging for 2 checks providing you have 4 or more sources, and will most likely be sending a bunch of those resources to the trash unless you had jamming. Luckily for Hunters players, that was very much doable thanks to the inclusion of Clockmon as an inherit. The last of the Digimon to join the Shoutmon line is the true final form of Shoutmon. Shoutmon Cross 7 Superior Mode joins the fray, clad in gold and ready to cause a ruling headache. At 15 play cost, it's the highest cost Shoutmon to date, but also can be functionally 0 play cost if done correctly. By having Shoutmon specifically on board when you want to digicross, you can reduce the cost by 1, then also use cards from the trash when digicrossing at -1 for every crossheart or blue fair trait of different card numbers. So if you have enough very set IDs, you can bring this beat stick down for 0 cost thanks to having a literal infinite number of valid sources as targets for its digicross requirements. Once it hits the field, it also returns all of the Digivolution cards from one of your opponent's Digimon to the bottom of the deck in any order, then spins that poor soul to the bottom of the deck soon after. This interestingly is the only removal of its kind where protection against source strips such as the X antibody doesn't work because it's not being sent to trash and instead being sent straight to the bottom of the deck. And often inherits that would keep you safe from something like this getting bottom decked before putting the helpless Digimon down into Davy Jones's locker. And just for good measure, while it lacks native rush, it instead has built-in delicate plan, turning off all options in security when you go face since there's basically no scenario where BT10 Rush Shoutmon wouldn't be in its sources. In most cases, this Shoutmon is going for face for multiple checks, potentially restanding and not activating options. At a colossal 17k with the ability to be 18 and shrinking opponent's security by 2k DP, Shoutmon effectively has pseudo jamming, being able to rip through security without a care in the world. And if that wasn't enough, for those that felt like committing to the roleplay bit, the tagged option Final Crossblade would do just that. For 9 play costs, you could delete a Digimon, then unsuspend your Cross 7 Superior and swing at the player with it. Cause what's a 9 cost to an ended game? So how does Shoutmon do now with its series final form? The deck that would retroactively go back to win Worlds 2022 actually didn't get off to the hottest start in the Japanese format. Releasing late in November did mean there wasn't long before the Cross 4 hits and Blackwell Greymon wouldn't be receiving its limiting until much later, which gave the deck a lot of trouble when the chips were down. It would still go on to pick up decent local wins in its opening weeks, however as time went on, it would be Blackwell Greymon X and the new Blood of Hunters that would be taking up the top spots. Just because Superior Mode wasn't in top 2 deck contention anymore didn't mean it wasn't doing well. Arguably a top 5 deck with some decent representation, it was just uniquely poorly positioned into the decks above it. Bloom Lordmon being on the rise due to its good matchups into the save decks made it harder for the champion rush style of gameplay to work for them, as piercing would still apply pressure when clearing boards rather than getting away with fighting for board at the cost. And Quartzmon, with its ability, Hunters were faster and able to skirt material save thanks to its ability to tuck even the biggest bodies away under a Tamer, and Blackwell Greymon without restrictions was just a step ahead even with the new support, as a single Hades Force could spell the end of multiple Tamers in one go. Although Crossheart was on the decline, that didn't mean Shoutmon was falling from grace. In fact, far from it. This time the king was instead battling the big bad Blackwell Grey with the new crowd. The Young Hunters, featuring new protagonist Gumdramon and Tageru, under the tutelage of Taiki and Shoutmon from his throne, would be the new contender for Blackwell Greymon X. Some very early Eastern lists were able to take some Tamer battle level events with the new Shoutmon amongst its rookie lineup, however the chaff will be cut from the list by the time Bandai's official championship prelims rolled around. Here, only the mentors, Shoutmon King version and Taiki Kudo would make the cut, Shoutmon being able to evolve for 0 cost, or for the cost of the Tamer itself to be played from the hand to play any 3 Hunters Tamers without paying the cost, and without restriction on how many Tamers you could have. Since it itself was recyclable using BT12 Psychomon, this meant that Shoutmon could entirely be responsible for Tamer play, swarming the board quickly while using its inherits to stop floodgates. While paying 3 or fewer for a memory setter in itself is a massive amount of value, Taiki and BT12 Uemano being able to load save in text cards from hand at the start of main to draw 1 and gain 1 memory respectively immediately increased consistency, allowing you to see the cards needed to use as Shoutmon Digicross fodder when you went minus from hand. Other important events like Evo Cups would occasionally see usage in Malaysia for both Shoutmon and Omni Shoutmon, but both would remain fringe, with only Omni Shoutmon joining the king in topping qualifying events in Japan. A format where best of one decides the difference between qualifying or not, the space for the deck was cutthroat, really only allowing for 5 cards of flexibility depending on what your lines were skewed towards. Some players would experiment using BT11 Omni Shoutmon again thanks to having save, making its 3 cost evo over level 4s a little less steep as an alternative means of popping floodgates. However, Shoutmon King version was not treated as Shoutmon. You would never quite get the double pop without committing to using a Shoutmon of some kind in your already tight rookie lineup. Toward the end of BT12, BT12 Omni Shoutmon would actually become the main secondary level 5 alongside a Resurgence superior mode, being used to clear boards in a pinch, reaffirming that Shoutmon could continue to be a threat, even if it was a supporting Digimon. As a result, we want to say congratulations to the following Evo Cup and National Qualifier placements. Gori from Japan, first at the Bandai Sapporo Championship Preliminary. Gary Young from Indonesia, first at the Alex Hobby Shop Evo Cup. Daniel Zijian from Malaysia, first at the Hobby Base Evo Cup. Saru from Japan, third at the Bandai Osaka Qualifier. Misao from Japan won the Osaka Qualifier. And Eshin from Japan, first at the second Bandai Hataka Qualifier. When BT12 hit the West, the results would see more of the same. There was just a single tournament with the top at anything higher than a large local, when Marco Pioveni and Alessio Disco were able to take 16th and 9th place at the Game Trade Italian Regional on Cross Heart. However, they would be the second highest Cross Heart at that tournament, with Gabriel Casaro going on to take second, outplacing all of the hunters at the event. Congrats to Gabriel and Elisio shouldering the Western Crossheart tops in BT12. For the rest of the Shoutmon results in BT12's English format, we'll be looking to the Hunters players. Federico Paulo Antonio, 4th place at the LATAM TCG Regional. Andrea Sepia, Gabriel Ruggeri, Julian Wakentin, and Rita Yassif getting 15th at the Game Trade Italian Regional. A set of players getting 4th and 2nd at the Game Maria Regional. Dwight Lee, 9th at the Core TCG May Webcam Regional. Cameron M, Sabbath 91, and Joe McGuinness with their 9th, 8th, and 4th place finishes at the UK Games Expo Regional, notably being after the June 1st ban list. The introduction of EX4 didn't add any new cards for Shoutmon, but it did add more results. So we also want to say a congratulations to Yasaka from Japan, first to the Bato Loco Evo Cup, KCH from Malaysia, first to the Toys Bar DC1 preliminaries, Yan Ki from Singapore, first to the DC1 Southeast Asia final, KCH once again second place at the 2022 championship for the SEA final. Over in the West, unlike the East, Crossheart was also able to add to the trophy cabinet off the back of Gil Daniel Mato Bernardo winning the Game Spirit Leon Regional. For the remainder of Shoutmon's results, it once again was with Hunters. Loan Vilasec at 3rd at the Leon Regional, Alberto Barahona and Marcos Greppi 3rd and 4th at the LATAM Online Regionals, Landon Fernau 8th at the Carta Magical Webcam Regionals, Keenan Davis 8th at the TAC Brisbane Regional, Ryan McCarthy 7th at the Play TCG Texas Regional. While it required hanging out with a new crowd, BT12 was undoubtedly a very successful set for Shoutmon, having won several events with both the Crossheart team and the new Hunters cards. BT13 would be the end of seeing new Shoutmon support for quite some time. Focusing on the Royal Knights in the 5th season of Digimon, there would be absolutely no additions that would change the game plan for the two Shoutmon decks. Due to a lack of interest of the decks in the East, we would see no new results with Crossheart, but frequent success once again with Gumdramon and the gang. With addition to gameplay focusing on a Megazoo style of deck, the introduction of burst modes and Belphemon, the new format was hostile to all kinds of decks, but Hunters and Crossheart were arguably not some of them. Thanks to having access to save, they were one of the few decks that wouldn't mind their entire board of level 4s getting cleared. However, Hunters would be far less comfortable about saying the same about level 5s. BT13 was notably a wide format in terms of deck viability, with all kinds of decks finding their footing despite strong representation at the tier 1 level. Being memory efficient and preying on a number of decks that lost to having polarizing bad matchups allowed it to skirt through top cut at plenty of events. Blackwell Greymon of course was still running around to great effect, and Machine Dramon remained popular. However, Machine Dramon being a losing matchup was only under the assumption that they were teched with BT9 Mega Dramon to delete 3 cost or less tamers. If they could keep deleting your tamers every turn, it'd be wraps, but if they played any tamer like they so often would, or one popped out of security, suddenly a Resurgence Superior mode would be able to tuck a machine under a tamer for it to never be used again. With the meta so wide and competition being fierce, BT13 in the East had Shoutmon as the 3rd most represented deck at the local and top level in the JP version of the game. Access to cheap blockers that still got value on deletion, and the ability to play out from raising and from an empty board helped contend with the most represented decks. The main innovations also came from shutting down markers early. Shine Greymon being the most represented deck by far meant that you pretty much tech to beat Shine or tech to beat everything else that lost to Shine when it knocked you out of an undefeated bracket. By this point in the game, Hunters were no longer even testing having Shoutmon from BT12 in any numbers to their rookie count, leaving the only Shoutmon names to be champions for its free playing of a tamer, and Omni Shout as the secondary ultimate to support a Resurgence. Taiki continued to be a 4-of, but in terms of Shoutmons you'd see 6 at most, as fewer players opted for more than 2 Omni Shoutmon if they even brought him at all. An addition to the metagame that Shoutmon actually can't take advantage of was the new training options. These 2-cost options, similar to Boost, look at just the top 2 cards of the deck and add 1 of the same color. Unlike Boost, these can pick up tamers as well as option cards as long as they match the training color. Then on the turn onwards, the delay option reduces the evolution of a Digimon into a Digimon with the same color by 2, refunding the effective cost of using the training. Unfortunately, as our king was long past the days of running monocolor red Omni Shoutmon beatdown, and both aspects of the training cards being color locked, it would rarely actually pick up a target for evolution. And it's not like either of the decks were particularly focused on red evolutions either, thanks to them being largely purple based for Hunters and Digicross based for Crossheart. As a result, there was a huge power budget that was not being afforded to the king and crew. Notably, the training cards wouldn't be present for the Western release, instead delaying these powerful promos to BT14, robbing Shine Greymon and Mirage Galgamon of massive consistency pieces that allowed the decks to consistently fold the rest of the metagame in the West. Notably, the training cards wouldn't be present for the Western release, instead delaying these powerful promos to BT14, robbing both Shine Greymon and Mirage Galgamon of massive consistency pieces that allowed the decks to consistently fold the rest of the metagame. On the back of Hunter's consistent results in the JP BT13 metagame, these players were able to take Shoutmon to the trophy room. Nikoro from Japan won the Card Shop Evo Cup, Rai from Japan won the Seagull Sendai Evo Cup, Hafid from Indonesia won the Guild House Joja Evo Cup, Yang Ki from Singapore won the Piku Play Evo Cup, Alan Liu from Malaysia won the Dueling Nexus Evo Cup, and Titan TCG from Malaysia won the Diversity Core Gaming Evo Cup. There was actually one result for Crossheart in BT13, and that's off the back of Van Diester winning the Aqua Card Games Eris Toys Trading Evo Cup. Some people felt burned by the deck and others just wanted to play other things, and in best of 1 format, having access to the decks that could in theory run 8 trainings and had pretty scary security in the form of several tamers was still incredibly potent. In the West, however, where trainings were yet to be implemented, instead the introduction of 2 ace cards did shake things up. As the format got wider, with Shine and Mirage still very strong but not nearly as consistent, which allowed the secondary decks to become even stronger. Hunters uniquely stood out in Western BT13 meta as a strong deck, pretty much unaffected by the differences between the 2 formats, actually benefiting from not being able to make use of their global consistency boosters. However, some of the other decks that became meta threats were able to comfortably play into it. One of the most interesting parts of the metagame in BT13 is decks would largely burst their opponents down in 1 or 2 turns after some setup. Shine Greymon could donkey roll you after 3 or so tamers made their way onto the field, just pushing out a rookie because of how Marcus let you cheat Evo costs. Belphemon would be shuffling Gizmons until they got Belphemon on board so it could blast you for 4 checks in a single turn, often with enough bodies on board to finish from there. And Western exclusive Alphamon just didn't care for royalty. As a deck that was set up and then promote for a kill, Hunters wasn't able to interact with it in a meaningful way. In few instances where Alphamon had to play for board, the new Royal Knight was completely immune to any kind of tucking, invalidating a Resurgence superior mode and actually requiring Omni Shoutmon to have any semblance of a chance. Unfortunately for the king, this protection also extended to deletion, so you'd have to somehow amass the memory to remove it with 2 different removal options just to clear the stack. Mirage would continue to tax you for activating Taiki's start of main effect, requiring you to make use of Uemano as a hand thinner and memory extender before accidentally turn skipping yourself. Machine still required players to be asleep at the wheel, and the prevalence of Bloom Lordmon once again continued to keep save decks honest by doming them with piercing and quartzing the tamers. And the ever-present security control was problematic for the Hunters, although the built-in delicate plan to meta threats like Red Hybrid and Crossheart did make these few and far between, but relevant if you were trying to make a deep run. In the West, Shoutmon was able to make a splash with Crossheart thanks to the following. Kevin Vargas, 11th at the Nest July Regional, and Peter Griff, 13th at Gen Con's August 5th Offline Regional. However, once again, Shoutmon's biggest results would come off the back of Hunters being a frequent force across all of Gen Con. Congratulations to the following. Jesus Ishmael, 5th at the Nest July Regional. Riley Hook, runner-up at PPG's July Webcam Regional. Loan Vilesh, 3rd at Raging Train's August Regional. Enrique Gomez, 3rd at the August 3rd Online Regional. Shan Trin, 5th at the Gen Con Offline August 5th Regional. Hien Hyun, who won the Gen Con August 5th Online Regional. Edwin Lam, 6th at the Gen Con August 6th Offline Regional. Whilst it came out much earlier in the East, the reprint set RB1 ended up being an extension to the BT13 format, giving some older cards cheaper reprints to decks that were sometimes priced out from being readily buildable. As a result, Hunters was able to add a few more notches to its trophy belt, picking up a 2nd place, top 4, and win in North and Latin American regionals. In the face of adversity, it can be said, once again thanks to the young Hunters, that the ever-present 4 of Shoutmon King version and Taiki specifically had a successful season of BT13. When looking for Eastern BT14 results, we were expecting to see more of the same, Crossheart languishing in obscurity with no pieces, and Shoutmon clocking in for his mentoring 9 to 5 at the Hunters daycare. So imagine our surprise when Shoutmon returned 5 results in BT14's tournament results archive, actually more than Hunters. Sure, 2 of them were just tamer battles in Japan, but a result is a result and we'll take what we can get at this point. Shoutmon Blitzbox of all things was one of the lists winning here, however this isn't super indicative of the actual format as it looks like they might have just been doing some sort of throwback week, or maybe Blitzbox low-key had it like that and we're not sure as we can't actually see their run, but support as late as BT9 Omni Shoutmon X and Starter Deck Jesmon made their way into the list, so it looks like there was some modern support to the list, albeit not that much. Congrats to Ebby for their result when looking up Shoutmon outside of Hunters for the East. Despite Blitzbox coming back for surely what would be one last ride, the Crossheart reunion did gain 4 more wins in BT14, 1 at the Tamer Battle with a return to the old style, 4 of everything you'd expect, the Secret King version as a bridge, and 1 superior mode for its wholly unique removal. Cross 5 and Cross 3 being at nearly max copies alongside Cross 7 at 3 show that the Cross 7 turbo style of play was well and truly alive. But all in all, it was a quiet season for the start of BT14 in Japan. The relatively wide meta with a bunch of new toys allowed for many different styles of decks to see results at different levels. Hunters, which didn't really see much of a change, was reserved for those later stage qualifying events where forgetting about the decks could prove fatal. Additionally, with how hated Crossheart was at the peak of its relevance, very few players had actual reason to experiment with a nerfed version of the deck when you could play new things that did what Crossheart wanted to do, but better. The last result for Shoutmon outside of Hunters wasn't even fully free of Hunters cards. Unique techs alongside your standard 4-of saw a return to Merva as well as Shoutmon plus Star Sword to play around the prevalence of Floodgates. The Omni Shoutmon and Zeeg being level 5s with save also made them Quartzmon targets, allowing for completely unexpected Quartzmon lockdown. Sure, you'd be turning off your own tamers for the rest of the game, but with the number of tamers that Crossheart runs, you'd also be setting up your own burn damage with your Quartz, as most people weren't often playing around it. The consistency of the strategy can be called into question as this deck was just 1/3 of a 3v3 team that was able to win in Japan, but congrats to Shupi and their team for making an entirely unique Crossheart list at the top. For solo efforts at bigger events, we want to say a congratulations to Cycle from Japan, who was able to take first place at the Tokorozawa Evo Cup, making use of Shoutmon DX, Mervamon, Kiriha, and Final Crossblade as his techs, and Tana from Japan winning the Arashi Osaka Evo Cup, making use of Spadamon, Ignite with no Merva, Star Sword, and running 4 King versions and 2 of the Crossheart Secret, as well as 2 of the Hunters version to free play any of the 6 Taikis in his list, with Final Crossblade once more. As for Hunters, it was more of the same stuff on a different day. More and more decks were out to challenge Hunters, and it served as more of a rogue pick with the new hotness running around. Despite general standardization in the West, the East was still experimenting with their ratios to cover their different regional metas. The 2 biggest wins for Hunters were Yasuka from Japan winning the Bandai Ultimate Cup, beating out 100 plus players with your standard core of 4 King version, 2 Omni Shoutmon, and also opted notably for tamer techs such as Takumi Alba and BT10 Uemano for a predominantly purple list. Overflowing power as a one-of allowed for evolving from under tamers, which allowed recycling of superior modes, Omni Shoutmon, and reusing the spent King versions to apply more tamer pressure. Poon went from Thailand, also was the runner-up at the Card Shop Ultimate Cup, and leans more into the toolbox aspects of the various colours, dropping the Omni Shoutmon from 2 to 1 to fit space for a Chohokaimon, whose neg 3 was sometimes more flexible for cleaning up smaller bodies and drawing from the effect as well. To facilitate the 1-ofs of Crimson Blaze, BT12 Taiki Kudo and the King once again returned as 4-ofs. Over in the West, things honestly weren't much better. No Shoutmons did anything of note in those regions. We couldn't find any top 8 finishes for Shoutmon and just a few Hunters results in the West, in part due to the Ultimate Cups at the time being single colour events. Of the Western events played during the BT14 format, 4 of them were Ultimate Cups, completely locking out your ability to play Crossheart or Hunters due to them being multicolour decks. Our first Hunters result came as the 6th place European Championship finals list hosted by Jockmock. Amongst a sea of Mirage Galgamon, Hunters was one of the only 2 decks not to be the big blue wolf. This would be a prevailing theme in LATAM where some of the Hunters players would show up, only one of them would make it into top 16. Darren Gibson, 6th place at the Raid and Trade European Finals, Farid Trujillo, 15th place at the LATAM Online Regionals, Diego Wende, top 8 at the LATAM 2023 Finals, and Martin Rossini, top 16 at the Phoenix Reborn Argentina 2023 Finals. Just like other formats, the introduction of extra set boosters sometimes threw decks needing support a new bone. Unfortunately for the King, this would not be one of them, further extending the gap between some top decks and our humble Patriarch. As Veemon changed her allegiance and went to quite literally dog walk the metagame with the new Anubismon, the Western format would quite literally have no place in Top Cut for even the most dedicated of Hunters players. You were either Merv Anubis or designed to beat Merv Anubis, which Shoutmon simply was not either. While the king continued to support in terms of new cards, this would also be the return to not seeing him at all in any form of results for the East. This time a delayed ban wasn't in favour of our humble ruler, instead a new tyrant, no not that one, would be crushing all those that opposed it underfoot. A Pokemon coming into BT15 unrestricted to the JP format meant that much like EX5, you either were the top deck or designed to beat the top deck. And unfortunately for both the Crossheart and Hunters decks, Shoutmon and the crew fulfilled neither condition. Over in the West, a Pokemon had just 2 weeks before a much justified ban hammer came crashing down from above. Thank Yggdrasil we weren't subjected to the same abject horror of the apocalypse around every corner. With the pressure off and secondary titans being slain in the process, the West was able to see a little bit more variety in its metagame. And as such, our Monarch returned to the courts to oversee the young hunters once more. One extra caveat of importance is that the Ultimate Cups in BT15 reverted their rule set from the trialed monocolor format back to standard Digimon gameplay, allowing hunters and Crossheart to see viability in the format itself, ignoring the actual inhabitants that were now swimming in the same depths. Huge congratulations to the following players that, thanks to a complete absence in the East, are the only results for Shoutmon in these features lists. Abdul Claverweed, 15th at the Raid and Trade Online Ultimate Cup, Slade Blucher, 5th at the TAC Games Online Oceania Regional, Nova Bolt AH, 5th at the Organized Play Event Salford Regional, Diego Wende, 4th at the LATAM TCG Online Latin America Regional. Digimon Adventure 02 would get a brand new movie, and with it, the TCG would get a brand new main set, celebrating Digimon featured as part of the aged up cast. Whilst the full set wouldn't completely be 02 cards, BT16 wouldn't feature any new cards for the Shoutmon and crew. Both Crossmon and Hunters were far from being decks with new toys, and even the most devout of Hunters and Crossheart players were nowhere to be seen when it came to outputting solid results. The set of movies would come in the 17th set, bringing all kinds of protagonist support. Unfortunately for our liege, the Cross Wars series has been deprived of its rightful place on the big screen, but unfortunately the red carpet roll call would not be remembering our Ruby resembling Royal with the beginning encounter. Once again, without new pieces and a range of fantastic protections becoming the norm in the form of more delay options, Shoutmon and crew continue to struggle to see casual or competitive play. The addition of Liberators set EX7 would unfortunately continue this thread, as the Hunter set began to feel more and more like a side set. Fun fact, did you know at the time of writing, the seasons with Gumdramon have still yet to see a dub, but Liberators already has an English adaptation for the webtoon? It's a little apples to oranges at this point, but Shoutmon's latest appearance being long gone certainly didn't help with seeing new updates. Speaking of updates, we want to highlight a list that truly was a return to form for the JP meta. Omega Shoutmon and Shoutmon Double Cross took to the stage to showcase the new scrambles. The deck is, in practice, Omega Cheeks, and was another example of a Shoutmon pile not actually doing anything in the current format, but the idea was too cool to mention here. The player on social media known as Digimonmonv cooked up a list making use of free play ability of Scramble to have a Shoutmon hit the field every turn. Combined with a training and rush inherit of all the Shoutmons, your blitzing Shoutmon double cross would be a rush plus blitz body every turn. It was a blast from the past kind of deck, bringing BT5 into the current environment of red good stuff aces, Valkyriemon and Gallantmon Crimson mode being used to threaten aces during the turns that Omni Shoutmon or Shoutmon double cross finished turns. While the deck markedly didn't do anything, this fever dream of 50 had me and the stats team in a vice script trying to find it, so we just had to mention it on the results whilst we were on the light side for our Crimson King. Unfortunately, the 18th main set would be a support for a set that has also been derided for a general lack of focus on true Digivolution. The Frontiers main set will once again forego the King new tools to work to wrestle his way back to the top. Made worse, with the abundance of hybrid support, Shoutmon's more successful forays on Hunters would be actively detrimental by speeding up their game plan. Put a hybrid under one of my tamers? Go ahead. Thank you, actually. So once again, even at the local level, Shoutmon would continue to languish in a fall from grace. This video unfortunately has taken so long to script that mercifully, Bandai has released support for our fallen monarch. While the anime still had nothing new to offer, in lieu of an interest in Digimon's newest fiction as a webcomic, a look back to the underappreciated mangas of Digimon's past put Shoutmon once again in the limelight. The Cross Wars manga would bring a new skew to Shoutmon's Crossheart game plan, alongside support for other generals featured in the manga. With the new mainline set, we would finally get to see Shoutmon return to our standard size cardboard, alongside the introduction and utilization of promo Shoutmons that we've neglected to mention thus far. BT19 Shoutmon proper's on playability allows it to digivolve right into Omni Shoutmon underneath the tamer without paying the cost, effectively spending 4 to make a level 5 from nowhere. If you weren't making use of this though, its on deletion ability allows you to check top 3 for a tamer card, play it without paying the cost, and then save under it. Both are strong abilities, but one of the most notable parts of this card is that it once again is a Shoutmon with a rush inherit for Shoutmons in name. This elevates your total number of rush inherits to 12. Shoutmon Cross 4 returns this time sporting an 8 play cost, once again with -2 Digicross allowing for 0 cross 4, but this time it feels like Bandai learned their lesson because this body is borderline vanilla, making use of its inherits to actually have effects. What it does have though is a new design space for Shoutmon on crew, where the material save mechanic has instead been improved to an all turns. When this Digimon would leave the battle area, you can place up to 3 Digimon cards with Cross Heart trait from this Digimon's Digivolution cards under one of your tamers. What this means now is Shoutmon is no longer lost to non-deletion removal. Bounce and bottom decking the Megazords would still allow you to recur your pieces for safer pressure without high roll. Shoutmon Cross 5 would maintain the same design, however also sporting a non-deletion that free plays a level 4 from your tamers. What these new designs lack in explosive power, it really is hard to argue with a potential 0-cost beat stick with rush that can return the majority of your used materials. For its golden form, Omni Shoutmon gets a new card in BT19, both on play and when digivolving. It hits one Digimon on the board for -3k and then pops a Digimon with 3k or less, making use of both its yellow and red sides. This allows for a double pop of small bodies or cutting down most mid-sized Digimon to a more manageable and deletable number. On deletion, it places one Digimon under your tamers, and to cap things off, the card can also be used for Digicross in place of Shoutmon. And what does it give you? Another rush inherit, of course. Then the final piece of Shoutmon comes in the final form of the gang. Making use of the manga exclusive evolved forms of the Cross Heart Digimon to form Shoutmon Evolution Cross 6 or EX6, the Digimon not the set, can come down for 1 cost with all sources at -2 each. The 12k beat stick, once down on the field, its on play would blast the opponent's board with a radiant ray of -1k per color in its evolution sources. In ideal situations with all of the double color evolved forms in its sources, this can be for as much as -6k wide on the board. With Alliance, Reboot, and Material Save 4, this final boss is when attacking pops an opponent's Digimon that has equal to or less DP than it, and it's non-once per turn. Now that the crew has a new look, let's see how it's been performing. Right now in the early weeks, each of the generals have found success, although Shoutmon's W is with some question marks. Promo 152 Shoutmon plus Derulo Cannon has joined the fray in the list to make use of a 2k shrink, inherit recycle, and a pop to clear play cost floodgates. The first list to take a win came at the Japanese Mugen Cup. Taking the Shoutmon and now notably green low end of Crossheart would form Leopardmon at its top end to free play the evolved forms at reduced cost. Not quite the EX6 turbo we expected, but congrats to player enemy for their win. For actual Shoutmon lists, again this took so long that players have actually managed to pick up some wins at the local level. Some players split between focusing on the active control of Shoutmon EX6, topping out on the occasional Z Millenniumon to pop your array of composites to overclock the game, whereas others focused on Shoutmon Cross 5 Turbo like days of old. For Evo Cups, we do want to say a congratulations to Ren from Japan, first place at the Full Comp Evo Cup, Kirk Ceramines from the Philippines, first place at the Mega Cebu Evo Cup. Bill showed a heavy focus on making EX6 as many times as possible, running it at counts of 3 or more, or having a backup boss monster with a Shoutmon name just to be on the safe side. BT11, Shoutmon Double Cross, and Cross 7 were used as one-offs as tech choices interchangeably across the winning lists, with Kirk having a heavier focus on red and black pieces, splashing in the BT19 Deadly Axemon to give his Shoutmon's reboot after doing their damage. However, Ren went for a few more consistency pieces to make sure the cards never got stuck anywhere, slotting in tamers like TK to grab pieces out of security, Davis to pick up otherwise unsearchable Z Greymon while grabbing the evolved Derulu and Ballistamons, and the trio tamer joining Taiki on his quest. Both players would fill out the differing rookie lineups with Promo Shoutmon plus Derulu Cannon we mentioned earlier, as well as using rush bodies to soak up inherits. So that's it. How good was Shoutmon actually? Well, it's kind of been a feast or famine Digimon. In its main Crossheart engine, Shoutmon has either been at the very top of the game or simply not playing at all. Things will be a little less all or nothing when mentioning the Hunters core, but their also lack of frequent updates relegated Shoutmon to being a niche appearance when the format allowed for their gameplay. There was a time where many a deck would consider slotting in play cost reduction floodgates just to shut this deck down, but now it often feels like collateral when the deck gets cooked by those same floodgates that are in place to shut down bigger threats. The jury's still out as to whether the manga editions will be the missing pieces that help our red ruler reign over the game as the West speeds towards unification and the format is still fresh in Japan. However, we can comfortably say that Shoutmon has absolutely earned its place atop Digimon's Mount Rushmore with several high-profile wins and a Worlds win when no one had it on its radar. Big thank you to everyone that has stuck around for this project. A huge thank you to our ultimates who are going to be getting this early. And if you like seeing Digimon content like this, we're going to try and get it out as frequently as we can. Obviously, your support goes a long way and allows me to commit more time to it. Big thank you once again to all the stats teams that have been helping us out and all the historians that were able to reach out to me and kind of give me the information that I need. Let me know in the comments what Digimon you'd like to see next, and we will be kind of pulling that out to our ultimates where they're going to get to vote on what we see for the next video. We do have a couple lined up already, so I'm going to try and make sure that this isn't just a once every month. We do want to try and get like 2 to 4 out a month, but it's early in the project and this took a lot of time. We've been talking about it for a while, but it finally is done. But yeah, if you enjoy daily Digimon content or as close to it as possible, please hit the like button, subscribe, join the Discord as well. Let us know what you think of the video. If today's your birthday, then happy birthday. And as always, have yourselves a damn good one.